So we're now going to move from overview to some specific areas of research. I'd like to introduce Andrew Campbell, who's a professor of computer science here and the head of the laboratory that looks at smartphone sensing. His work is really innovative and groundbreaking. I think you'll enjoy hearing about it, and I believe he's going to present some data related to students at Dartmouth and how he's improving their functioning, I hope. So please welcome Andrew Campbell.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here, and I'd like to thank the organisers for organising a great event and for inviting me. I'm a computer scientist, and it's always fun to come and meet people who work in other disciplines who are motivating a lot of the research that I do. So I'm really happy to be here. I want to talk about the smartphone, and if you actually came to my office in Sudikoff, you'd see my cell tower. And this is all the phones that I've been using basically since 2006, when smartphones happened. So it's almost pre-smartphones. And as my kids have got older, when they were young, they come in, they just knock it over. And now undergraduates come in and they sit down and they bump up against my coffee table and knock over my cell tower. If we look a little bit closer at the phones, what really excites me as a computer scientist, technologist, is actually the amazing things that they put in these phones. I mean, the phone today is equivalent to a Mac of 2 years ago. Most phones, without getting too geeky on you, have got 4 computers in them that are just main processors. They're called cores, as well as lots of other chips that do digital signal processing, sort of fantastic, touch-tone screen. But what's really sort of excited me over the last 6-7 years, and I think is enabling technology for your community and many other communities, is the embedded sensors that they put in the phones. And the reason my cell tower keeps growing is because, every 3 months there's a brand new phone with something very cool in it. So if I attempt to do a live demo here, this may be a complete disaster, but let's see how it goes. So this is a Samsung Galaxy S, and I think what you might find cool about it is a new sensor that they've just put in this. First of all, there's a sensor that actually on the back of the phone here that is a heart rate, measures heart rate, basically. It's a specialized sensor. Previously, you could put your finger over the camera and it would, guesstimate your heart rate. But now there's actually a sensor that does this. And I just tried it a moment ago. This phone just came on the market about a month ago. And actually, I have no heart rate. That might be because of my stress level, because at 10 o'clock I'm teaching Android programming about 10 minutes from here, which I have to run. But let's just try it. I'm supposed to keep still and quiet, so I'm not still and quiet because I can see my sort of hand shaking, and it's probably not going to work. Okay, well, the demo didn't work. That's the first part of my demo. But there's a sort of hacky heart rate monitor on the back of the phone. Another piece of software that we've developed, let's see here, is the ability for the phone. What I'm showing you is a piece of software that runs in the background of the phone, and it's telling you that I'm in conversation. So if I actually stop speaking, and I probably won't, it'll go to silence. So the phone knows when I'm speaking, of course, and so therefore it can determine how many conversations I'm having a day, the duration and frequency of those. And of course, that ties directly into sociability, which is an indicator of many well-being metrics, right? Mental health metrics as well. So, for example, we can easily understand sort of socialization or how much you engage with people in conversation. The accelerometer is saying I'm walking. That's because I'm actually shaking a bit here, because I'm a bit stressed. So if I stand really still, it says I'm stationary. If I walk across, I have to be a mobile phone. If I walk across a room and a set of walking. So if I care to run it, I won't run around. And I have done in the past. If I was cycling or was in a car, my phone knows all of these activities. What else? What other cool sensors can I show you? There's a sensor here, a gesture sensor, that I can do this. And actually, all of the photos I'm scrolling through are the same color, so you don't see the change, right? So this is a gesture sensor. And I can scroll back. And these are just sensors that have just been added. Essentially, the activity sensor is software we put on the phone, but the other sensors are sensors, physical sensors that are just added to the phone. So it's an amazing time. I believe we're at a fantastic sort of crossroad in this everyday technology that's going to enable many, many new applications, both in healthcare and lots of other domains. So the phone has not only lots of different radios, it probably has 6 radios in the phone. It has, accelerometers, gyroscopes, fingerprint. Actually, this particular phone has a fingerprint sensor. As I get into the phone now, not by unlocking it with a code, but just putting my finger on the fingerprint sensor, which is right here on this phone. It has a gesture sensor. It has a barometer sensor, so I can know if I'm walking upstairs or downstairs. Has a heart rate sensor. Of course, it has location. It knows what I'm doing. This is getting really scary, isn't it? It has front and back cameras, so the camera can understand my gestures at any one time. Most people, kids particularly, are staring at the phone 90% of the day, right? The phone knows essentially what their physical facial gesture, face recognition, effect can be computed from the phone. The microphone is an amazing, powerful sensor, not only to determine, am I speaking, the duration, but it can actually, in the future, it will be able to find stresses in your voice to determine how stressed you are. So it'll do voice recognition on you against a machine learning algorithm to say, am I stressed? I'm actually quite stressed at this moment because I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to, get over there. Has a light sensor, and it's got this actually has 2 light sensors. It has a normal light sensor, so it dims the screen in different light conditions, but it also detects ambient light as well. Has 2 light sensors. Has a proximity sensor, so if I put the phone to my head, the back screen goes off. Doesn't have an air quality sensor yet, and it doesn't have an emotion sensor yet, but we can clearly infer emotion from this phone. So this is and the reason I say we're at a crossroad, because it's both an exciting time when new technology is put out there, but also a sort of scary time, right, with all the news in the media about eavesdropping, companies collecting all our data. So privacy is a huge concern, and my colleague in computer science, David Coates, is sort of leading the way on trying to keep things private whilst moving forward technologically. We don't want to stop because it's an exciting sort of area. I won't talk about privacy today, but certainly it's a big caveat in this area. Whenever I give talks, I'm always hammered by privacy. So that's my caveat. Well, of course, we can use the simple accelerometer, and you can look at the signals from the accelerometer, and you can see the difference between standing, which is flat, sitting, standing, walking, and running. You can see the sort of gait in the actual signal. So imagine what a computer can do with machine learning algorithms. It can do phenomenally well at finding patterns in all these signals from all these different sensors on the phone to infer physical activity. Likewise, I showed you a demonstration of understanding how much conversation I'm involved in. We'll be able to measure, and we've done some work on this in detecting stresses from voice. And we can also, this particular application that we're using and developed with Dror Ben-Z for one of his projects, unobtrusively measures sleep. So what I mean by unobtrusively is there are many, many apps out there on the market where, when you go to bed, you put some data in, when you get up, you put some data in, or you wear something in bed. I've tried them all out. I remember the first time I used Zio, I got up in the morning with a terrible headache, threw that in the bin. If you just think about it for a moment, your phone actually knows how much sleep you're having without you actually ever saying anything to it. Just think of your own behavior with your phone. When I go in at home at night, I typically I'll plug my phone in to recharge it and leave it by the printer downstairs. I have 2 kids. there's noise around the house until, the house goes quiet and the lights go off. And then in the morning, lights come on, noise starts happening, the phone gets moved. If you take any one of these signals, it's a fairly poor inference on sleep duration. But if you take all of these signals, movement, sound, light, and you feed them into a machine learning algorithm, we can actually infer your sleep with plus or minus 30 minutes without you ever interacting with it. So your phone is learning and potentially personalizing, as what Lisa said, personalizing to your sleep habits wherever you leave the phone in the house. So this is all really exciting. And the question is, what are we going to do with this technology? And lots of folks in this room are very, very interested in well-being, physical well-being as clinicians or clinical psychologists in mental health. What got me sort of excited recently was I've been at Dartmouth for about 8 years now, and we teach terms here. And previous to that, I was at Columbia University for 10 years where we taught semesters. And it was a real adjustment for me to switch. It was like going from a marathon to a sprint, right? And so looking at the kids that I teach, I could see sort of anxiety levels increase throughout the term, sort of burnout happen. And I decided, it'd be nice to actually get under the hood and find a little bit more out about how students do. And of course, I was looking at assessments that were coming back from my class, some of my classes, and I would see comments like this. So fast. I know that's how it has to be, but I'm not going to say it was slow. Or this one. The lab and lectures were great, ridiculously hard and so much work that I really enjoyed them. I can't think of a 10-week period in my life when I have learnt more. I'm rubbing my own ego here. This is my favourite. 10 hours each week coding. This class sucked out my soul. But what I've learned about Dartmouth students, unless you're sucking out the soul, they're not getting value for money, right? So I got sort of interested in this, and some of the driving questions were in this piece of research that I'm going to talk about for the last few minutes. I should watch my time here. Why do some students do better than others? Why do students burn out, drop classes, or even drop college? We know that sort of stress and depression is rife in this community. Of course, there's lots of social issues that have been discussed at Dartmouth, and I won't touch on those. I'm smart enough to do that. What is the impact of stress, mood, workload, sociability, sleep, mental well-being on educational performance? Why do some kids do better and others don't? Why do some kids deal with stress better and deadlines better and others don't? And is there any behavioral pattern, common behavioral pattern, when you look at all the data from all these students? So I had some driving questions, and I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I didn't really have a good hypothesis. Like everything in my life, it's more bottom-up. Well, here's some cool sensors. Let's build some machine learning. How can we apply this technology to get some insights into a problem where there are some hidden states? And that sort of motivated this work. And at the back of my mind from teaching at Dartmouth, I was thinking, I see, over these 10 weeks, I see the stress level rising. I can visibly see it in the class, and I can see the students are getting tired. And, clearly the workload increases as the term progresses, right? And so I asked myself, is there some form of rhythm to this term? So we did a study, actually, and we finished it this time last year, and it was in this particular class that I'm teaching now. So there were 75 students in the Android programming class last spring, and we signed 60 students up. 48 ended up completing the study for 10 weeks. Here's a demographic of the students. And so this was 48 students over 10 weeks running an application that we put on their phone, or we gave them a phone to carry. So we had a terrific amount of data. Just let me briefly say what the system was, and I'm not going to get too technical here. But right, okay. So the system over. Let's see if I can do it like this. Okay, so this didn't work. Oh. What have I done then? I think I've gone. That does work, Bob? All right, great. So just quickly here. So this is the phone, of course. We had an application that ran on the phone. This is not a smiling student. This is some picture I got off the web. They didn't look anything like that at the end of the class. But so here's the Android phone. So we had a self-report mechanism on this. and it was based on a piece of software called Paco, and there's been a presentation at the centre, Leeds Centre, 2 years ago from the developers Paco. And so we used that for EMA, so we got a lot of self-reports, in-situ sort of data. We used SurveyMonkey for pre and posts of a lot of well-being, mental health surveys. The stuff that I developed, my group developed, was a bunch of continuous sensing algorithms that ran in the background of the phone that users never interacted with. It just ran in the background of the phone. And it ran through these machine learning or classification models that determine the activity, standing, walking, running, etc. Conversation, how much conversation I'm involved in per day, the frequency and duration, sleep, how much sleep I'm getting, just the duration, and location, where am I? So this is all continuously kept. The EMAs were for stress, mood, social, exercise, and behavior. And we pushed all this into the cloud, and we did some analysis of mental health, academic performance. We looked at personality. I won't talk about that today. This was on the cloud. So that's the basic system. The students actually, over the course of actually the 10 weeks, we actually got, believe it or not, 32,000 EMA self-reports from these students on various different things. But they loved this one. They really liked this one. So for every, when they're using their phone, a survey popped up. And before a survey popped up, we popped up this thing called PAM. And basically, these pictures here, now how am I feeling? So I click on a picture, and then an EMA popped up, like how stressed are you, or what mood are you in? So these are actually correlated with PANAS positive effect, these pictures, and they can select more pictures as well. So this is an example of, the PANAS popped up with these pictures, and then there was always a different sort of survey. So we collected a lot of EMA data as well. The pre and posts were perceived stress, PANAS, UCLA, loneliness scale, PHQ-9, flourishing, and Big Five, and Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. The data, just to give you an idea, when we actually looked at the data's actually pretty fascinating, I think. What this plot shows is just some structure in the data. It shows actually all the classes for all the students. So if you think about it, I had 48 students in the study in my class, but they're taking 3 classes, right? Though we did know what the classes they were taking. But so they typically Dartmouth students taking 3 classes. And this is the Dartmouth schedule. So I'm teaching in the 10 o'clock slot, which is coming up quite soon. So what this is for those 48 students, what classes they took throughout the whole term. And the whiter it is the more students are in that class. So of course, this is my class, right? The only common class for all of these students is my class, right? And that's why I taught on Mondays at 10, Wednesdays at 10, Fridays at 10, and the X hour. And these are all their other classes. So I can see the students' work day starts at 9 and sort of ends at 6, 9 to 6. That's their work day. They go to work to go to school, right? If I looked at all their sleep data across the whole term for all these students, I could see, well, some of them go to bed before 12. Oh, this is all screwed up. This is 12 o'clock. Most of them go to bed between 12 and 4 o'clock. And some go to bed, you can see, like 7 o'clock. So, 12 o'clock they're going to bed. So at 12 o'clock they're going to bed. So from 9 to 6 is their day. From 6 till midnight is what we call the evening epoch. And night is 12 a.m. till 9 a.m. So we actually broke our data up based on this structure and analysed it in these different epochs. So we looked for markers in these specific epochs as well as for the full 24 hours. So there's a natural structure in their day. So just to quickly tell you a little bit about the data set, it's 53 gigabytes of data. There's 32,000 EMAs. There's a lot of pre and posts and interviews. And we have a lot of objective sensor data. This is just data from the phone that nobody's interacting with for activity, sleep, conversational, sociability data. We have the EMAs, and we have also, importantly, I had access to all of their grades for all of their classes. So I know what classes they're taking. I know where their classes are, so I can look at attendance of all those classes, and I know all the grades they're getting, not just my class, but all the other classes they take that spring, as well as we're doing exit and entry surveys. So in the few minutes I've got left, I just want to give you a taste for the results, and I can't go into them in great detail, but things that might be of interest to this community. And one of them is correlations between objective sensing data and PHQ-9. So this is data that nobody ever touches, that comes from the phone, right, that runs through our classifiers, and then we look at Pearson's correlation function against PHQ-9 depression scale. And so, interestingly enough, in the class of in a study of 48 students, we actually had some students that were severely depressed to moderately severely depressed, etc., right through the whole scale. And we found correlations with PHQ-9 so PHQ-9 negatively correlates with the number of collocations. What this means is, collocations means all of your phones are actually giving off Bluetooth signals. And so if I'm with a group of 100 people like this, I know I'm with a group of 100 people. So the less people I'm around, the more I'm depressed, basically. That's that message. The number of the conversation duration and frequency also is negatively correlated with PHQ-9 scale. So, and this is in the literature, of course, but this shows objective sensing data correlates with what is in your community, right? Which is essentially socialized. The less conversation I'm involved in, the less I'm speaking to people and interacting, the more likely that I'm going to be depressed. So duration and frequency strongly correlate with depression. And finally, the less I sleep, the more likely I'm being depressed. So what we see here is for PHQ-9, we're seeing the number of people I'm around, the amount of conversation I'm involved in and its duration, and the duration of my sleep directly correlates with depression scale. Another result on the not on the sort of mental health side, but just to taste the result on the academic performance side is this unobtrusive sensing data also correlates with GPA for the spring term for all their classes. So it negatively correlates with a thing called indoor mobility. What indoor mobility is, we keep information about how much students are moving around outside, and when they go in any of the buildings, we work out how much they're moving around inside. And I won't get into technically how we do that, but we use the Wi-Fi network to do that. And so the less amount of indoor moving I do at night, GPA correlates negatively with the amount of indoor movement I'm doing at night, and also during the day. So moving around, the amount of moving around I do somehow correlates with GPA. We don't know why. Conversation frequency and duration, the more conversation you have, the more frequent conversations you have, the better you're going to do it in the class, which is sort of interesting as well. But we don't know why. We don't know the cause and effect. So in the last few minutes, I just want to, so I've shown you some specific sort of correlations to do with particularly PHQ-9 and spring term GPA. Now I want to show you some of the trends over the whole term. So when I started this study, I had a gut feeling that there were these trends in the data, and I want to show you what those trends are. So over the course of so this is the 10 weeks, and this is normalized readings for a bunch of different objective sensor data. So if I look at these, and what I've got here is the amount of activity, the conversation frequency, the conversation duration, and the deadlines. So what's common to all the plots I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you three, is this red line here is all of their collective deadlines across the term. So take all of their classes, what are their deadlines, and when do their deadlines occur? So you can clearly see the beginning of term, there's few deadlines. They've come back from spring break, right? They're really happy. And then the deadlines build up throughout the term. The deadlines build up throughout the term, they peak, and then they drop off here. And there's a midterm week in here as well. Well, this is actually dying a bit. But over here, what we have is activity. So this is activity here. It's pretty high when they arrive and sort of levels off and doesn't rise or fall. This is conversation duration. It sort of starts sort of high, drops off, and then they start speaking again at the end of term. This is conversation frequency, the number of conversations they have, which is sort of low at the beginning, surprisingly, and then drops off. So that's the first plot. The second plot, this is interesting. They come back from, from spring break. They have high positive affect. So this is from the EMAs. And that just, plummets through the term. And they're not feeling good about themselves at all here. The stress level, conversely, goes from very low when they come back from spring break to peaks and stays high throughout the term. Their sleep, sort of when they arrive here, this is really interesting. The first week on term, they're partying like hell. So they're not sleeping at all. Then they get into the rhythm, have a little bit of sleep, and it drops off. This is midterm area. And then they get a little more sleep, and then towards finals, they just drops off again. And the final plot I'll show you, it's a bit, this is a bit complicated. Maybe I'll just pick it. So the deadline is common to all of them. So here is the number of visits to the gym. It just disappears halfway through the term and never recovers. This is really interesting. This is an attendance in class. Starts reasonably high and just levels off all the way through to almost, not quite non-existent at the end of term. This is for all their 3 classes. And I'll leave you with this result. We found there's absolutely no correlation with academic performance and attendance in class. 0. And when I told this to my students, this class that I'm teaching right now, they're like, okay, we're not coming next week. So I don't know why that's the case, but for all of these classes, all these students took, their GPA for those classes, their grades had no correlation with whether they all attended class at the complete time or whether they're at the bottom end of the percentile. Okay, so that's some results both in sort of a mental health result, a academic performance result, and just some trends, which I call the Dartmouth term life cycle. And the natural question is, where is all this going? I believe that the phone is going to disaggregate, meaning it's going to break down and disappear. So I'll argue that maybe within 10 years for sure, there'll be no such thing as a smartphone. 10 years, there'll be no such thing as a smartphone. I don't know exactly what it will be, but it's going to break down into sort of wearable devices, right? And of course, in your community, there's a lot of biometrics being collected from wearable devices, but I'm really saying in the commercial space, to communicate and do the things that we do today, we'll not do it through staring at a smartphone. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but there's trends indicate here. Thanks for listening, and there's a number of people that helped here. Thank you.